number three. So we've been tracking how we imagine work will look in the future for a couple of years now, especially since post COVID. And we know that there are certain companies that have been very, very strict about the hours that people work in the office each week, whereas others have taken on a much more kind of futuristic view that people should work more flexibly. And we've obviously wanted to look at how brands therefore promote themselves, not only in terms of attracting people to work for them, but also how they attract businesses to invest in them and customers to buy for them. And so we've seen this kind of shift towards business imagery, especially office businesses, talking about kind of sense of belonging through in-person connection, and there being much more of a kind of a learning environment and a collaborative environment, which really talks to people sharing and learning and educating each other. So we have noticed that there are some really, really interesting kind of regional nuances in this, and I think it's worth talking about kind of how we're seeing business and the future of work happening in each of the regions. So let's go to you first, Kate, to talk about APAC.
Yeah, and the future of work is an interesting one, because I feel like we've had a lot of trends around either, certainly since COVID, we've gone from the great resignation, we've had quiet quitting, to one back in 2023 around the great exhaustion. And I think really what all of these things are talking to at its core is around wellness. So wellness in the workplace. And I definitely think from the research that we've been carrying out that certainly is going to set to continue in Asia Pacific. But what's interesting is that when we think about, well, what are we actually seeing from a search perspective, and what does that workplace wellness perhaps look like, is we actually did see a 42% decline in our customers searching for working from home. But similarly to what you mentioned, Rebecca, is we are definitely seeing a shift towards less about doing the work, and more about that sense of friendship that you get, whether it be online or whether it be in an office environment. But it is about showing that sense of belonging, that sense of connection that you could have, as well as that sense of friendship.
And if I think about talking about work, it's important to call out the United States specifically here, particularly because we're going through a very tricky, complicated time when it comes to return to office mandates that are being sort of adopted by many of the largest organizations, and now the federal government as well. And so we have a lot of change that's happening very, very rapidly within our sort of everyday lives, as well as also within how visuals are changing. And what's been really interesting to watch is it's that similar decline that Kate had mentioned about, searches and interest in working from home. We're also seeing that emergence of of office-based imagery, and we think that's going to be here to stay. But it's sort of what Rebecca was speaking to, which is about making the workplace someplace joyful and someplace people want to go to. So you're seeing visuals that show that connection that comes from being together versus that inconvenience that might be faced when you're returning to the office full time. And it's also important to note that, similar to the sort of overall aesthetic trends that we were seeing in lifestyle imagery, things that are very, very warm, earthy, and natural tones, you're seeing that sort of earthiness within the business imagery too, which I think, when we talk about what's happening in broader visual culture, alongside some of these return to office mandates, you also see the popularity of a show like Severance, right? And they're showing, and a lot of the ways in which they show the workplace kind of is reminiscent of how we looked at sort of cliches around the workplace 5-10 years ago. It's bright, it's white, it's stark, it's minimalistic, and that starkness is almost sort of eerie and a little bit scary. It feels claustrophobic. And so what we're seeing is, instead, in contrast, that a lot of businesses are embracing the things that look a lot more organic and natural and warm, and so that we can all feel good about what it's like to be in the workplace now.
And picking up Tristan and Kate from some of your points there, I think when I look at EMEA as a region, again, it's quite varied, but lots of stories now in my news feed in the last 2 weeks about revenge quitting. It's always been interesting to me how quickly working from home as visual patterns disappeared in the aftermath of the COVID pandemic. I think we're just all so delighted to get through it and come out and to return to offices for those who wanted to. But I also think it becomes quite interesting to think about how different generations are being represented with particular nuances that represents their values within the workplaces for the future of work. And when we think about all brands really focusing down on talent retention and, sourcing new talent, how do you really reflect that with accurate representations? And so I think it also equally becomes important for countries like the Middle East, especially we think about the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, for example, where 70% of the population are 30 years of age and under. So again, it's really trying to get to the heart of with Gen Beta being born already, Gen Alpha coming through the educational systems. We'll soon have the whole majority of Gen Zs within the workplace. Are we speaking really to what people are looking for best reflecting the future of work?